I gotta say it. ReZero is one of the best anime I have personally ever seen. We honestly don't deserve White Fox for the amount of passion, love, and effort that is put into this series. I mean, the core content is still fantastic, the web novel and light novel. But seeing it come to life and seeing the effort that is put into it, and even giving us once again an episode that goes beyond, above and beyond what a normal episode does for any traditional anime. This was a 29-minute episode with around a 1 minute and like 20 or 1 minute 30-second ending song with no opening song, and that says a lot. There is so much content within this episode. There is so much passion within this episode. It continues to blow my mind. And I know I say this type of stuff with certain series, like let's say Kaguya, you could feel the passion. But ReZero is just, it's one of those series where honestly, words cannot begin to even describe just how amazing this series is. Like, it is just so good. And this episode is a perfect reason to why I love this series, why I'm so passionate about this series, and why it is one of my favorite anime of all time. This is a brilliant episode, and I really just want to dive headfirst right into it. This effectively concludes Subaru's character development from Season 1. Around Episode 18 of ReZero Season 1, not counting the Director's Cut. I think that was around, like, Episode 10 of the Director's Cut. But the point is that this episode gives conclusion to everything that Subaru went through from Season 1, and that conversation he had with Rem, which was one of the most impactful moments of the entire story, because it finally allowed Subaru to overcome a lot of the problems he had. He realized that he wasn't owed everything, he didn't deserve everything, but at the same time, he can work towards a great goal to be a hero, a champion in people's eyes, and that's what he was trying to do. And this episode kind of has Subaru turn completely around and look directly at himself and look directly at his mistakes, and he has to figure out what he wants to do about these mistakes. And this entire moment is honestly kind of symbolized in the opening song, which is why I talked about it so deeply a few episodes back when we actually got to see the opening song of ReZero Season 2, and that's kind of what this episode was about. It was showcasing Subaru's development. It was showcasing him actually looking back at his mistakes, overcoming his mistakes, but then also bettering himself to continue moving forward and live his life to the fullest with no regrets whatsoever. And that is just a fascinating way that the opening song depicted this very moment within the episode. But there is just so much more going on, and honestly, let's continue talking about it. So, a big moment, honestly, that I think many are going to catch is the fact that there is an emotional scene where Subaru says that he feels like he's inferior. He feels like he is someone that isn't going to live up to his father, because ever since he was young, he heard many that was affiliated with his family, his father mainly, that was like, oh, that's your kid? He looks just like you, except his eyes looks like his mother. Oh, he's just like his father. He's just like his father. And throughout, Subaru's youth, he was constantly compared to his father. And obviously, this is going to have some form of a mental drain on anyone if you're continuously compared with another individual that you're obviously not the same person. Like, you're not the same person as someone else, and it's going to drain you eventually. And that's what happened to Subaru. As he continued to grow, and he continued to have these comparisons, he realized that he started to realize he wasn't the best at everything, and what he once was the best, it fueled his inferiority complex where he felt like he wasn't living up to his father's standards. And so to kind of figure out a way to battle this type of situation, to do really good at something, was to do comedy, make people laugh. And when you see him acting up and acting all charismatic throughout his past, it kind of plays a major part with what we saw throughout Season 1 and even maybe some sections of Season 2. And it's a big moment, honestly, to give clarification to a lot of Subaru's character, is that he kind of resorted to this charismatic, weird antics to kind of cope with certain things, to allow people to stick around, to have people think that he's the best at something, and eventually as he continued to up and up the antics as life went on and continued to try to do these things, one day he looked back and he realized no one was there. He had no one. He didn't have any friends. Nobody cared to hang out with him, and he didn't even really know how to interact with anyone. Because when you really think about it, Subaru's interactions with people are very skewed. He doesn't really know how to interact with people properly. I mean, look at his interactions with individuals throughout Season 1 and even Season 2. He doesn't really know how to properly communicate, and he is truly starting to learn how to communicate thanks to everything that happened with Rim and him. But you could see, though, that he has constantly had a problem with communication, and, you know, he's felt inferior. And that whole moment with his father, it was Subaru looking back and is like, I don't need to be you. I don't have to be my father. I don't need to be one-on-one exactly alike, and I don't hate my father. And he finally realized that he doesn't need to be special. He's satisfied with what he is, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that he's not going to work for what he wants. For instance, being a hero in some people's eyes. It's just such a fascinating way to give someone character development, along with already character development we were given quite a long while ago. It's kind of like similar character development, but it's just kind of giving its final push, its final conclusion, that everything we got at the end of Season 1. So let's get into one of the big elements, which was Subaru's parents and kind of what they represented. So, obviously, when you see the whole inferiority with Subaru, and he's able to overcome this, we have to look at his mother's side as well. Even though Subaru obviously doesn't feel inferior to his father anymore, there is some elements of his mother that caused this situation in the first place, and that is because, thanks to him being 50% his mother, it resulted in him not being fully his father. So, throughout his youth, he constantly was upset with probably his mother's half, for instance, being half of his mother, because it made it to where he wasn't his father. He wasn't as great as his father. And when you look at Subaru's features, everything that really encompasses what he is as a person, he has a perfect blend of both father and mother. He has some bad qualities from his mother that he constantly has disliked throughout Season 1 and even some sections of Season 2. For instance, his eyes. When you really look at Subaru, he's always been very self-conscious about his eyes. And so you could see that with his communication with his mother throughout this episode, the reason why he also probably felt so inferior to his father, could not live up to him, was because of his mother, having his mother's blood in him. And even though he doesn't directly say it throughout this episode, it's hinted and implied that he was very upset with his mother. He harbored some form of anger and resentment towards her, and she pretty much came out and said that she knew what he was feeling. Even though he didn't say it, she's like, I've been watching you, and I know what you are, or who you are, and how you've been feeling. And she pretty much directly pokes at Subaru's main issues that he's had throughout his life, which was him feeling like, I wish I didn't have these scary eyes. I wish I didn't have this weirdness about me with mayonnaise and other things, because obviously it's kind of bad sections of my personality that people don't really like. And he's like, if I would have been my full father, then everything would have worked out properly. And when his mother comes up and is like, look, you're 50% your father, which pretty much means you're already cool enough. You meet your quota. But on top of that, with the other 50%, you don't necessarily need to be me. You just be yourself. You be yourself, you be Subaru. So you can be your own person, because that's what you want to be. But at the same time, you can be as cool as your father. So you don't have to worry. Your traits of me don't really hold you back whatsoever. And the reason why Subaru's mother is able to say such an amazing thing is because obviously, even though it's not dived into, it's implied that she's went through something very similar. Because you gotta think about it, she's someone that has the same eyes as Subaru. She has this very weird aura about her. She's very weird, and she has the whole situation with the mayonnaise, to the green peas, to the whole, you know, suppository that she even mentioned to Subaru, which is like, what? And so she has these very awkward things she says, very weird things, but also weird habits and scary looking eyes. And you kind of put all this together, she obviously had a very difficult childhood. She was probably bullied a lot, people made fun of her, and because of that, she overcame that, and probably finding Subaru's father as what has resulted in her being very happy, having a good life. And that's why she's able to communicate to Subaru to such an extent. She's like, I know what you're feeling, that resentment, that anger of having those type of eyes, and having this type of personality, etc., but don't blame yourself. It's okay. You will overcome it. And obviously, she couldn't downright say that because she even admitted that there's nothing she could say that would make him feel better. There was nothing. Like, even though she says she comes from her own personal experience, it doesn't mean anything. Here's the thing, he doesn't want to hear it from his parents. He doesn't want to hear it from his mother or father because, you know, he already resents them to a certain extent. So he was never going to get the information he needed to overcome his problems. So no matter what his mother would have said, even if it came with really good logical information, he wasn't going to listen to it. And that is why someone like Rim and Millie and all the others throughout, you know, this world that Subaru is now a part of has helped him be who he is right now. So it's such an amazing way to give character development. It's a fantastic moment for ReZero just for that alone. And honestly, I haven't even begun to dive into everything. There is just so much to really pull from the scene. It is absolutely beautiful. And I can't help but love Subaru's parents because they are so supportive, so loving, and the way you see how they're depicted, it shows that Subaru truly was loved. He did not have necessarily a bad life. Before he came to where he's at now with Amelia and Rim and all that, he technically had a good life. Yes, he was having a lot of problems. Yes, he wasn't going to school, etc., but he did have a loving family. He did have people that cared about him and loved him, wanted to see him succeed. And in those moments, so he realizes what he had and also what he lost. And what really just hits you, like really just sucker punches you, is that moment when his mother looks at him and she's like, "Take care, goodbye." And Subaru looks back at her, and then he has a whole flashback and realizes that this is the exact thing as how it happened at the beginning of his story when he transported to his new world. When he was leaving to go to the convenience store to pick up food before he was eventually transported to where he was in the capital city, you know, his mother said, "Take care," and he never returned those feelings. He never said, "Take care, I'll be back, I'll be home safely," etc. He just left, and you see that imagery of him walking into the darkness all alone and isolated, not looking back, no regrets, nothing, just moving on. And it harbors so much emotion because it's like Subaru now will look at that and like, I wish I would have said something. I wish I would have said goodbye. I wish I could have said, like, you know, "I love you, I'll be back," etc., "Take care," but he did not say it. And that really hits hard. And it matters so much that Subaru was actually able to talk to his mother, even if we come to find out that, yes, this mother and father isn't really legit or not, and he wasn't really talking to them. It doesn't change the fact, though, that Subaru was able to make inner peace. He was able to make peace within himself, with his past mistakes, his regrets, and his family, and he will be able to move forward as a person and better as a person because of everything that he was able to go through throughout this episode. He went through so much. So it hits. There's so much emotion. Honestly, I cried so hard, though, when he walked out that door and he didn't say goodbye to his mother. Those regrets really do hit so freaking hard. I couldn't begin to imagine what he feels that he did not get to say what he wanted to say. But thankfully, he was able to say it, even if it turns out, you know, it wasn't, you know, real, what we saw throughout this episode. Which, by the way, let's talk about a few other details. One of the things I do want to mention, though, is the fact that Subaru at the beginning of this episode was constantly having pain. He had pain in his chest, his head, etc. And this can be a little bit confusing for some. And I do want to kind of clarify this a lot because I feel like some are going to misinterpret it for the fact that he was probably having like memory problems. He was trying to remember Amelia and all that, what you see throughout the middle of the episode. He does remember her, but most people would probably watch this episode and assume that's where that pain, etc. is coming from. Maybe partially parts of it was, but most of it was anxiety, anxious behavior. That's what that was, actually, because let's think about where it kind of popped up. It popped up soon as his father mentioned school. And then Subaru's like, "I'm not going to school," and then he rushed into his room, and he had pain. Then when he gets down, and, you know, sits down on his bed, he looks at the clock, he's watching the clock, and he starts to have pain and gets anxious and all that. And what this represents is that he is feeling dread and anxious, like, behavior because he wants the time to get to a point to where he can no longer make it to school. For instance, he was looking at 8 o'clock, and if it gets to 8 o'clock, he would no longer be able to make it on school in time and not be late. So it's like, it's a little bit of a relief. But at the same time, the reason why you see a lot of pain throughout the day as well is because he also realizes that since he's not at school, when people see him, they'll be asking, like, why aren't you at school? Like, why are you out here on this beautiful day when you should be at school? And it brings up all his anxiety and all that he could be at school, but he's not. And that's kind of why he walked away from that dude that his father was talking with, was because he was feeling very anxious. He was feeling inferior because, once again, it was another person that, his father knew that was comparing Subaru to him, etc. And, Subaru felt like, I'm not my father, which he isn't, but he had that, grief and resentment. And that is why he was feeling that pain, all that anxious behavior. So, anyways, what else is there really to talk about? I mean, there's so much to really dive into, and I might have to make a separate video to really get into it because, there's just so much. So, one of the big things that does need to be dived into, though, is the situation with Subaru towards the end, with Echidna appearing. That's a big moment. That's a really big moment, because when you see Echidna sitting there in the classroom and he walks in, and Echidna's like, oh, I didn't expect you to be here so soon and all that, and overcoming this and all that, it pretty much lets us know that this was all a trial of some kind. He was going through some form of trial, looking at his past and overcoming certain mistakes. The question is, did he actually get transported to the past, or was it just all some form of elaborate, illusion for him to come to terms with stuff that happened within his life? Whatever the case may be, it's very clear that Subaru has overcome a lot of issues that he had even after his conversation with Rim. And it really does show, though, why he loves Rim so much, why he cares about her so much. What he said to his father in this episode, he's like, I wanted my father and my parents to say they hated me, they despised me, they wanted to throw me out. But then he meets Rim, and she just straight up says, I love you, you're a good person, you're, giving up doesn't suit you, and, you are a hero. He heard everything that he wanted to hear, but at the same time, he didn't expect it. He didn't feel like he was worthy, because he was shoved down so far into the dirt, he felt like he wasn't worthy. I mean, he already felt like he was worthless, and he wasn't special before even coming into the new world he was in throughout, ReZero. But after getting into the world and dying repeatedly, he realized it was amplified to even a greater extent. He wasn't even an MC of this new world. It wasn't meant for him. He was even in worse shape than he was before. And so when he was at his lowest point, Rim coming to him and talking to him like she did, it saved him. It was something that he never expected to hear from someone. Someone saying, I love you, don't give up, and you can do this, you are my hero, you are special to me. It's not something he ever expected. Which, another thing too about all of this, when it comes to Rim's conversation with Subaru, we also gotta look at how Subaru reacted to other characters throughout Season 1, which is a very big detail that I think many are going to overlook. His interaction with Julius in the middle of the series, when he, goes to the Capitol and he embarrasses himself in front of all the knights, in front of Emilia, he proclaims himself as a knight, and he just looks so foolish. It now makes so much more sense now why he acted like that towards the knights when you see this backstory of this episode. He acted like that is because Subaru, yes, he did want to be special. He believed that he was owed the right of being special, because transporting this world kind of built up his ego, thinking that, oh, this world was meant for him. But obviously, we know the story, and he knows the story now. But on top of that, he was self-reflecting when he was talking to Julius. He's like, oh, what makes it so great to be a knight and all that? Born to be a knight, born into knighthood, etc. What makes it so great? Which he was comparing himself with his father. That's what Subaru was doing in that moment, and that's what's happening there, is that the reason why he was so upset with Julius and so upset with the knights and embarrassed himself was because that was the beginning part of his character development, where he finally started to expose his ugly personality and the feelings he harbored inside of his self for so long. And it was finally like bubbling to the surface and coming out. He was finally ready to talk about some of his problems that he's constantly went through throughout most of his life. Which, speaking of which, there needs to be something said, and that is the parents being shown in this episode, or in this series in general. It's not something you see. Like, let's be honest here. When's the last time, truthfully, you saw an Isekai series do what this episode of ReZero did, and do it right? Like, do it right. Didn't do it for a comedy gag. Didn't do it just quickly and just move on past it just for like a, a tearjerker scene that really doesn't add much to anything. I'm talking about a legitimate scene that gives so much characterization, development, but on top of that, allows you to meet characters that was a part of Subaru's past that were actually good people. Very good people. Subaru left behind individuals that truly loved him. He didn't leave behind just nothing. He didn't just come to this new world and he has no regrets. Like, he does have people over there where he once came from, and he left them behind, and the question is, what happened to them? How are they feeling about their son just up and disappearing, since technically the last conversation that he had with his family was when he walked out that door and did not even say goodbye to his mother. It really does put into question all of this, like, what happened, but also, you know, just like, holy crap, like, when's the last time a series has actually done something to this level? It's so impressive, honestly, and I just wish more anime did this, but at the same time, if more anime did that, it wouldn't make stuff like this so special, because just the way this was done, it's so shocking, so out of left field, it's brilliant. So yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. It's just a fantastic episode of ReZero. Man, I love this series. Like, I legitimately love this series. It's so good. I can't get enough of it. It really just, it gives you so many mixed emotions, because, like, when you walk into this episode, it's not necessarily just emotional because of depressing and all that. It's more just uplifting emotional, because it's such a different tone you're not expecting from ReZero, and that's just, it's amazing the way they did that. But okay, I'm going to leave it at that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, you know, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like, and if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.